Today I'm auditioning colors for a woven scarf for my wonderful sister-in-law. She wanted something in olive green, and when I sent her photos of this handspun yarn of mine, this was the main color that she wanted. And she has chosen to be surprised, so I hope she's not watching this right now as I audition different color combinations. And she said a little bit of contrast color would be fine, which is great because that means I will get to have some fun seeing how this color looks when it's woven up with this variegated green from Greenwood Fiberworks, which is not quite as blue as it looks on the camera. I'm looking at these in natural light, and the camera is actually making things more blue. So this is one of my possible colors, and the other one is this simple variegated. This is chroma fingering in the colorway seaweed from Knit Picks. So I have a hunch, but I want to test it out, that this one is actually going to look better combined with this yarn. And the tool I'm going to use to assess this is just my plain old Zoom Loom, my Shack Zoom Loom, which is one of the handiest and least yarn intensive methods I have ever seen of seeing how two colors look together. So to test my colors, all I need is my Zoom Loom, a fork, the two needles it comes with, the weaving needle and the needle for weaving in ends, and scissors, of course, and a roll of masking tape. So I'm going to wrap the first layer with this handspun yarn. This was commercial top that I got. I can't remember where. I'm thinking maybe the Woolery, and it's a breed that I had never spun before and that I desperately wanted to spin because it had such a cool name. This is a breed called Zwartbles, and I am probably mispronouncing the name. It's spelled Swartbles, and if I remember correctly, it comes from Germany. So I'm going to work this on the Zoom Loom, which is going to be a little bit tricky because this is generally we tell people don't go any fatter than say a DK weight, and this is definitely at least a worsted weight, and in some spots an Aran weight. Uh, but I'm going to give it a shot. So I'm going to wind my first layer in this warp balls, and I do that by fixing the a tail that's long enough to weave in the slot, and then I am just going to wind and wind and wind. Uh, the tricky part is not stretching the yarn, and it is about going through every set of pins on the last two pins. And I need to be really careful that I don't stretch the yarn. So I don't want it to be saggy. So this is just the edge of saggy right now. I just want it to be, but I don't want it to be stretched. So I have to find that happy medium, which is always the trick with the Zoom Loom, I have found over the years. Uh, so a Zoom Loom costs, I don't remember, less than $50. I think it's about $39 retail, and it's a low cost investment in a way to audition yarn combinations without spending a lot of money or using a lot of yarn, because a Zoom Loom square takes 8 yards total, and since I'm using two different yarns, it's going to take 4 yards of each yarn, and that feels like a suitable sacrifice for a test. Okay, so now I've got my first layer wrapped, and this is where I'm going to cut and pull out my tape. And if I have not overstretched or understretched the yarn, if I had overstretched all these wraps, the yarn would spring back the minute I let up on the tension, but it did not do that, which tells me that I did a good job of managing my tension. Okay, so typically on a Zoom Loom, you wrap the first 3 layers, and I'm going to do that. But what happens on the Zoom Loom is you're actually wrapping all of the warp and half of the weft, And I don't want to do it that way on this particular yarn audition. I want to warp it in one color and weave it in another color. Okay, so now that I've got the first layer done, I've taped off just a little bit of masking tape the back of the yarn, or I've taped the yarn to the back of the loom. And to start layer 2, I'm going to do the same thing. I don't have a slot, obviously, to fit it into, but I'm just taping the end of the yarn to the back of the loom. And now I am winding half of the weft. So and if I chose, I could actually wind just up to the middle of the loom with this color, the Knit Picks yarn, and then do the remaining half in this one. But I feel that that doesn't give me enough to really assess what's going on with these colors. So instead, I am going to wrap all of the second layer in this Knit Picks yarn. And this rustling you're hearing in the background is me double checking my directions. Whenever I don't do my Zoom Loom for a long period of time, I forget what where to place the yarn, which is about the only thing I don't absolutely love about the Zoom Loom. But that's my problem and not the loom's problem. Okay, so on this pass, this is the second pass, and again, I'm doing this with the Knit Picks yarn, the commercial yarn. I just follow the instructions and again, go around the second and third pins in every group. And I'm going to pause while I do this. Okay, and now that I've got this layer of weft looped around my pins, I'm realizing I grabbed a part of this skein where none of the colors changed. But I think that's going to be okay because the section right after this, you start to see some of the colors change. And so when I actually start weaving on my square, I should be okay. Either that or I can wind off enough of this ball to reach a color changey part, and that's going to be a lot more useful in providing me information. So now it's time to wrap the second layer of my handspun yarn. And again, I'm going to secure it on the back with a piece of painter's tape. Man, this roll of painter's tape is going to last forever, and it is one of the most useful gizmos you're ever going to want to use for weaving. Okay, and again, I just want to double check because if I do this wrong, the weaving's not going to be much fun. Okay, and there are actually little markings, you can see it here, that tell you this is layer 3, so I actually need to go between these two pins. And that's never the part that I have a problem with. For me, the part is, okay, which pins do I go around as I at the other end? And it's actually pretty easy to tell by the time you reach this third layer, which is the first two pins in each group. So I'm going to just pull this together very quickly. And again, the trick is to have enough tension on every layer that you wrap like this. It's to have enough tension that the yarn isn't sagging, but not so much that it's stretching. In other words, when I take this woven square off the pins, I don't want to hear a boing as the yarn loses all its tension and pops off the pin, as the square loses its tension and pops off the pins. I also don't want the square to shrink enormously. So I'm almost done. And so you can see how fast this can go. And this is with me talking the whole time. If I were just concentrating and paying attention to the yarn itself, it would go faster. And I'm going to tape off this and then I'm going to measure my last layer of yarn and weave across with it. Okay, before I started weaving, I wanted to wrap off enough of this ball that I could start to see the color changing, and I'm really glad I did because I have knitted with Knit Picks Chroma yarns before, and I had forgotten that the color changes are really, really, really slow color changes. So I had to wind off this much of a full ball before I could really start to see a difference in the changes in the color. And again, I'm afraid you're mostly going to have to trust me that the yarn is actually starting to change color because this natural light is not making it very obvious. Okay, so to start weaving, I'm going to wrap. Actually, yeah, this is a little tricky because the Zoom Loom is not designed this way. Here's what I'm going to do. I am going to, because it's normally, you're just using the same yarn, but if you want to do it with different yarns in different layers, you kind of have to fudge it a little bit. So I've stuck my weft yarn, my last layer of weft yarn, in the slot where I started winding. Whoops, and there it goes again. It would help if I had wound off this twist ball straight from Knit Picks into a cake. I wouldn't have all these issues. And if I wind the yarn 3 times around the pin, sorry, 5 times around the pins, that is, you know what? I need to double check that one more time because I forget. Yep, 5 times around the outside of the pins will give me all the all the weft yarn I need to weave this square. So let's come back when I've woven the square.